My wife slid a folded piece of paper across the breakfast table, said the DNA test came back. Go ask your mom why. And walked out of the kitchen, leaving her $6 coffee completely untouched. I didn't follow her. I just sat there and read it 3 times, then folded it back exactly the way she had. That was 11 days ago. And this morning my mother sat on my couch and said, "If you say so, sweetheart," for what she thought was the last time. Except Elena had already set up her phone on the bookshelf, and every word was recording. I'm going to tell you exactly who I was before this. Marcus Webb, 34 years old, high school history teacher. The kind of guy who irons his shirts on Sunday nights, remembers to buy flowers on random Tuesdays for no reason, and has exactly one, signature dish. A slow-cooked beef stew that my wife Elena claims was the deciding factor in her agreeing to a second date. I coached junior varsity soccer on weekends. I graded papers at the kitchen table. I called my mother every Thursday at 7 p.m. without fail, which she reminded me of whenever she sensed I might be pulling away. I was, by every measure available to me, a completely ordinary man. And I loved that. I loved ordinary. Elena and I had been married 6 years, together for 9. We met at a housewarming party where she was standing in the corner reading the host's bookshelf and silently judging the titles. I walked up and said, "The Nicholas Sparks collection is a deal breaker for me too." She laughed exactly once, looked me up and down, and said, "You get one more." I spent the next 9 years trying to earn that look again. She's a nurse practitioner, works brutal shifts, comes home hollowed out sometimes, shoes off at the door before she's even fully inside, socked feet on the hardwood, hair still up from a 12-hour day. But even on those nights, she'd drop onto the couch, put her feet in my lap without asking, and say, "Tell me something interesting." And I would. Every single time. We had a good life. Genuinely good. The kind where you catch yourself in the middle of a regular Tuesday. Pasta on the stove, rain on the windows, her laughing at something on her phone across the room. And you think, yeah, this is it. This is the whole thing. And sitting inside that good life, so quiet I'd almost stopped hearing it, was my mother, Sandra Webb, 61 years old, retired school administrator, owner of the most aggressively maintained garden in a 3-county radius, church treasurer for 2 decades running, and the single most skilled passive-aggressive human being I have ever had the complete misfortune of loving unconditionally. I want to be precise here because I spent years being imprecise about this, and imprecision is how she survived. The comments started before Elena and I were even married. Small things. Calibrated things. "She seems a little guarded, doesn't she? Not naturally warm." This was said about a woman who had, 20 minutes prior, spent half an hour on the floor playing with my nephew's Lego set because he'd asked her to. I watched it happen. She's very career-focused. Nothing wrong with that, of course. Just something to think about. This was said at dinner after Elena got a promotion. The promotion we were at dinner to celebrate. My mother raised her wine glass, smiled at Elena, and said it directly to me, like Elena wasn't sitting 4 feet away. Elena just kept eating her pasta. I know now that she was doing something else entirely, filing it away, cataloging it, building a case I didn't know was being built. But the thing about my mother's comments was how she always landed them. Never loud, never cruel enough to call out cleanly. Always with this particular half smile and her signature phrase, "If you say so, sweetheart." As in, you believe whatever you need to believe. I know the truth. It drove Elena absolutely insane, and I kept telling her it was just how my mother talked. I said that for 6 years. I said it so many times it stopped being a defense and became its own kind of cruelty. Past me was, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, a spectacular idiot. The red flags were everywhere if I'd wanted to see them. But I'd built a whole architecture of not seeing, and my mother knew exactly how to work within it. Then about 8 months ago something shifted. Elena started asking questions. Not accusatory questions. Not fight questions. Research questions. Asked in that careful, clinical tone she uses when she's already assembled most of a puzzle and is looking for the last few pieces. "Do you know if your dad's side has heart disease history? Does your mom talk much about her parents? Her childhood? Have you ever done one of those ancestry DNA tests?" No to all 3. I had no reason to. I was Marcus Webb, Irish-German on my dad's side. Some vague Cherokee ancestry on my mom's side that she mentioned at dinner parties when it felt useful. I knew who I was. I didn't ask why she was asking. I know. Then 3 weeks ago Elena came home, with 2 DNA test kits. Framed it as a health screening thing she'd read about. We sat on the couch, spit in the tubes, watched 3 episodes of a cooking competition show, mailed them the next morning. I thought nothing of it. I went back to being ordinary Marcus Webb. Right up until Tuesday morning when she slid that paper across the table and didn't touch her coffee. Let me tell you what was on that paper. Standard DNA results. Ethnicity breakdown. Irish, German, Scandinavian. Nothing surprising. Except Elena, who is a nurse practitioner with actual scientific literacy and apparently an 11-month head start on me, had circled one section in red pen. The paternal haplogroup results. Which, and I am not a scientist, so I will relay this as it was explained to me later, made it biologically impossible for Robert Webb to be my biological father. Behind the DNA results, paper-clipped, was a second page. An ancestry database match. A first-degree match, the kind the site flags as close family. A man named Thomas Calloway, 58 years old. Millbrook, Ohio. The same town I grew up in. His profile had a photo. I want you to understand that I have a slightly crooked nose from breaking it playing soccer at 19. I have a specific jawline I've seen in mirrors my whole life. I have a particular brow ridge that I always just thought was a Webb thing. Thomas Calloway had all 3. Not similar. Identical. The way you look like yourself. I sat at that table for a long time. The coffee went cold. The morning light moved all the way across the kitchen floor. The neighbor's dog barked at something and stopped. I thought, there's an explanation. There is a logical, reasonable explanation, and I just need more information. But underneath that thought, quiet and certain as a stone, I already knew. I folded the paper back exactly the way Elena had given it to me. Then I drove to school and taught 32 16-year-olds about the causes of the French Revolution. I gave a genuinely great lesson. I don't know what that says about me. I came home that night to 2 cups of tea on the kitchen table and Elena sitting with both hands wrapped around hers, waiting. Which is how I knew. How long, I said. Not a question. Sit down first. Elena. Marcus. Sit. I sat. About 14 months, she said. I opened my mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. 14. Your Aunt Patricia told me. Now I need you to understand who Aunt Patricia is. Patricia Webb. 70 years old. Robert's sister. For cats, strong opinions about casseroles and organized religion, zero tolerance for small talk. She is the family historian, the keeper of the uncomfortable truths, the woman who has sat in the back of every family event for decades, watching, filing, waiting. Apparently at my cousin Donna's baby shower, 14 months ago, Aunt Patricia had pulled Elena aside and said, no preamble, no softening. Does Marcus know about Tom Calloway? Elena said she didn't know who that was. Aunt Patricia had looked at her for a long moment and said, oh, that woman. And then she told her everything. Thomas Calloway grew up in Millbrook. He and my mother had been together before she met my father. High school sweethearts, the kind that ends in a way neither person fully recovers from. Sandra and Robert got together, moved fast, got married, had me 9 months later. Except the timing was complicated. Because Sandra had apparently still been seeing Tom Calloway in the early weeks of her relationship with Robert. Nothing shouted, nothing documented. Just a whispered, half-known thing that Robert's family had carried quietly for 34 years, because Robert loved Sandra, because they'd built a life, because sometimes the story you choose is more important than the story that's true. Robert Webb had raised me as his son, coached my little league, taught me to drive in an empty parking lot on a Sunday morning, patient as I am never patient. Walked me down the aisle at my wedding with his hand on my shoulder, steady, proud. He had probably known. On some level, in some quiet corner of himself, he had probably always known. And he had chosen me anyway, every single day, without ever once making me feel like a choice. My father died 3 years ago. Cardiac event. 2 months after he retired. I didn't get to ask him anything. I'm going to take a second here. Okay. The thing about learning something like this is that you don't learn it once. You learn it at the breakfast table, and then again doing dishes, and then again at 3 in the morning when the house is completely quiet, and you are suddenly re-experiencing every memory you have through a new, terrible lens. Is this why there was sometimes a distance between us I couldn't name? Is this why my mother looked at me certain ways I never understood? Is this why she has spent 6 years trying to slowly, quietly push Elena out of our marriage? Because Elena was the person most likely to look clearly at things my mother needed kept blurry? That last one. That last one sat down on my chest and stayed there. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Because it wasn't mine to give you, Elena said. It's your life. Your history. I couldn't hand you something like this before you were ready to hold it. So why now? She put down her mug. Because 3 weeks ago your mother called me while you were at soccer practice. Elena's voice went very even, very steady, which is how I know she is furious. She told me she'd been talking to a real estate agent, that she was thinking about buying a property near us. Moving closer, she paused. And she said, Marcus and I have always been close. Closer than most mothers and sons. I hope you understand that won't be changing. The room was very quiet. She said that to you. She said that to me. I thought about 6 years of if you say so, sweetheart. I thought about Elena sitting across holiday dinner tables, absorbing it, not flinching, filing it away. I thought about what it costs a person to carry that kind of information and still show up, still make it work, still put her feet in my lap and ask me to tell her something interesting. I'm sorry, I said. For every single time I told you she was just protective. Elena looked at me for a moment. Then she reached across the table and put her hand over mine. We're going to be fine, she said. But you need to have a conversation with your mother. She paused. And Marcus? I want to be in the room. I called Aunt Patricia that night. She picked up on the second ring. I know why you're calling, she said. No hello. We talked for an hour. She told me Thomas Calloway had found the ancestry match 6 months ago. Had reached out to my mother privately. My mother had not confirmed anything. He hadn't contacted me directly because, her words, he didn't want to disrupt your life without knowing if that's what you wanted. A man who had been denied the knowledge of his own son for 34 years, and his first instinct was to protect my peace. I sat with that for a while. Your father loved you, Patricia said, before I could hang up. Robert Webb loved you the way people only love things they've chosen. I need you to know that. I got off the phone, went to the bathroom, sat on the floor, and cried in a way I haven't cried since my father's funeral. That specific, awful, total kind of crying where your whole body is involved and there's nothing to do but let it finish. Elena didn't say anything when she came and sat next to me on the bathroom floor. Just sat there, which was exactly right. Eventually, I washed my face, came out, told her what I was thinking. She listened to the whole thing. Then she said, okay, but we're doing this together. She reached into her cardigan pocket and set her phone on the counter. I already downloaded a recording app, she said. I stared at her. How long have you had that on your phone? 3 weeks. Reader, I married an extraordinarily prepared woman. I called my mother Friday morning. Can you come over Saturday? I need to talk to you. Of course, sweetheart. Is everything all right? We'll talk Saturday. I could hear her recalibrating on the other end of the line. My mother has spent 61 years being the most prepared person in any room. She felt the change in my register and started preparing. What she couldn't know was that we'd been preparing for 11 days. Saturday morning I was up at 6. Made coffee. Watered Elena's plants. Graded a set of essays on the Industrial Revolution with what I can only describe as eerie calm. Elena left for her shift at 7. Kissed me at the door, squeezed my hand once, and said, you know what to do. At 11:30, I placed the manila envelope on the coffee table. Inside, DNA results, ancestry match, and a printed photo of Thomas Calloway. At 11:58, I set Elena's phone on the bookshelf behind me, propped between 2 books, a nursing reference manual, and, appropriately, a copy of the corrections, angled toward the couch. At noon exactly, my mother knocked. She was wearing her good blue cardigan, hair freshly done. She'd brought a Tupperware of oatmeal cookies because she always brings food when she's nervous, like sweetness can absorb whatever's coming. Sweetheart, she said and hugged me, then looked around. Where's Elena? Work, I said. It's just us. Come sit down. She settled onto the couch, smoothed her cardigan, looked at the manila envelope. On the table the way you look at. Something you've decided not to acknowledge. What's this? She asked, nodding at it. Open it. She looked at me, then back at the envelope. Then she picked it up, folded back the flap, and pulled out the contents. She went through the DNA results first. I watched her face. Not a flicker. She went through the ancestry match. Still nothing. This woman had been managing information for 34 years. She wasn't going to break over a piece of paper. Then she got to the photo of Thomas Calloway. And she stopped. She held that photo for a long time. Maybe 40 seconds. Maybe a minute. I wasn't counting. When she looked up, her eyes were wet. How long have you known? She asked. 11 days. Does Elena know? Elena has known for 14 months. I watched that land. Watched her face reorganize itself around this new information that the woman she'd spent 6 years subtly, persistently trying to diminish had been sitting across holiday tables, carrying the one thing that could end everything, and had chosen, over and over again, not to use it. She never said. No, I said. She didn't. My mother looked back at the photo, and for just a moment, one small, unguarded moment, she looked at it the way you look at something you once loved, and let yourself destroy. Not performance. Something real. Then I watched her reset. The shoulders going back. The chin lifting slightly. The very subtle preparation for management. Marcus, I need you to understand that your father, Robert, he knew, on some level. We never had an explicit conversation, but you let a man raise me, I said, without ever having an honest conversation about whether I was his biological son. It was complicated. We were very young. Tom and I had ended so badly, and Robert was. Did Thomas Calloway know he might have a son? The pause that followed was the longest of the conversation. He had suspicions, she said. I didn't confirm them. So you let a man spend 34 years having suspicions about whether he had a child. Marcus, I was trying to protect our family. I've been thinking about that word a lot this week. I said, protect, because here's what I keep coming back to. I leaned forward slightly. You've spent 6 years making comments about Elena, her warmth, her priorities, her commitment to this family. Little comments, carefully placed, always with just enough plausible deniability that when she mentioned them I could tell myself it wasn't that bad. I paused. And 3 weeks ago you called her and told her that you and I have always been close, closer than most mothers and sons. And you hoped she understood that wouldn't be changing. My mother opened her mouth. That was a threat, I said, dressed up as a statement. And the entire time you were doing it, the 6 years of it, Elena was sitting across from you knowing exactly what you'd done, knowing the thing that would end you. And she said nothing. She protected me from it until she decided I could handle it. I looked at her. So when you talk about protection, I need you to understand that the most protective person in this story is the woman you've been trying to push out of it. The room went quiet. My mother sat very still. And then, like muscle memory, like 34 years of a reflex, she couldn't stop. If you say so, sweetheart. Soft, almost gentle. The same tone it always came in. The same half-smile beginning to form. Except this time I just nodded. Yeah, I said. I do say so. I reached over and picked up Elena's phone from the bookshelf. Pressed stop on the recording. Set it back down on the table between us. And watched my mother's face understand exactly what had just happened. The half-smile didn't complete. Something behind her eyes went very still, the way water goes still right before it freezes. Marcus, I'm not going to use it to hurt you, I said. I want to be clear about that. But I needed this conversation to be real. I needed there to be no version of it you could rewrite later. I stood up. I love you. I'm going to need a lot of time, and I'm not sure what things look like on the other side of that. But I needed you to know that whatever story you tell yourself about today, this conversation happened exactly the way it happened. She sat there for a moment. And for the first time in my entire life, my mother looked like she didn't know what to do next. She stood slowly, picked up her bag, moved toward the door. I held it open. At the threshold, she turned and looked at me. Really looked, the way she hadn't in years, and said quietly, "You're so much like him, Marcus." And I said, "Which one?" She didn't answer. She walked to her car. I watched until she reached the end of the driveway. Then I closed the door, sat back down on the couch, pulled the Tupperware of oatmeal cookies toward me, and ate 4 of them in a row without tasting a single one. Petty? Maybe. Necessary? Absolutely. Elena called at 4 that afternoon, between patients. How'd it go? I used the recording. 3 seconds of silence. Then, good. She said, if you say so on tape. Marcus, I know. How do you feel? I looked around my living room. The manila envelope still on the coffee table, the Tupperware with 1 cookie left, the afternoon light coming through the window at the angle it always does at 4 o'clock. Like someone took a splinter out of my hand that I'd had so long I stopped feeling it, I said. And now my hand really hurts. She was quiet for a moment. Yeah, she said. That sounds right. The next 72 hours were, in a word, a lot. My mother called 9 times in the first day. I let them all go to voicemail. The messages started organized, measured, careful, the voice she uses for school board meetings, and got progressively less so. By message 7, she was crying. By message 9, she said, "I just don't understand why Elena has to be involved in everything," which was so spectacularly tone-deaf that I actually had to set the phone down and look at the ceiling for 30 seconds. She texted my cousin Donna. She texted my cousin Brian. She called her church friend Barb, which I know because Barb texted me directly and said, "Your mother told me some things, and I want you to know I don't think it's right, and I'm sorry, and if you need anything, please call me." I had not spoken to Barb in 7 years. I was genuinely moved. Then my mother posted on Facebook, "Sometimes the sacrifices we make for the people we love go unappreciated. Praying for grace in difficult seasons, folded hands." 52 reactions. For comments from people with no context offering prayer hands. Donna screenshotted it and sent it to me at 11 p.m. with the caption, "Your mom is out here fighting a war on Facebook, and she won't even tell anyone what the war is about," and then a string of crying, laughing emojis. I laughed for the first time in about a week. Really laughed, the kind that surprises you. Here's the part one didn't expect: the allies. I'd prepared for silence. I'd prepared for "let sleeping dogs lie and think about the family, and she's your mother, Marcus." I'd prepared to be mostly alone in this. What I got instead was Aunt Patricia, who called Monday morning and said, "I should have said something years ago. To Robert, to you. I was a coward about it, and I'm sorry." She cried. I cried. It was the ugly kind of crying, the real kind. The kind that actually helps. Donna, who texted me a 17-message thread that included, "Elena knew for 14 months? She is an actual saint." And also, "Your mom said something at Christmas about how Elena wasn't fully committed to the family, and I never pushed back, and I feel terrible. And finally, I'm on your side completely. Whatever that means, I'm on it." And Uncle Gerald, Robert's brother Gerald, who tells terrible jokes and cried at my wedding, who called me on Wednesday night and said, "Your dad knew. I want you to know that he knew, and he chose you anyway." Every single day. I was there for some conversations I won't get into specifics about, but I need you to hear this. Robert Webb looked at the situation and he chose you. That was a real choice. It meant everything to him. I pulled into a parking lot and sat there for 20 minutes after that call. That's the thing nobody tells you about these situations. The person at the center of the secret, the one who did the thing, who made the choices, that person is rarely the most interesting part of the story. The most interesting part is always the people around them, quietly choosing. I reached out to Thomas Calloway through the Ancestry platform the following Thursday. Short message. I told him I'd seen the match, that I wasn't looking to complicate his life, that I was open to a conversation if he was. He responded in 40 minutes. We talked for 2 hours and 40 minutes that night. He's quiet, measured, retired electrician, has 2 daughters. He talks about the way my father talked about me, with this specific, uncomplicated pride. He told me he'd had suspicions since before I was born, that he and my mother had ended in a way he'd spent years trying to understand. That when the Ancestry match came through, he'd sat with it for 3 months before reaching out to Sandra privately, hoping she'd, I don't know, acknowledge it, say something real. She hadn't. He said he was sorry, not for existing. He said it carefully, not for any of the things he couldn't control, but for the 34 years of not knowing, for the loss of Robert, who he'd heard was a good man. I told him Robert Webb was a very good man. We were quiet for a moment. "I don't know what this is," I told him. "I don't know what we are to each other or what we're supposed to be." "Neither do I," he said. "I think that's okay." A few days later, he texted me a photo of himself at 19. Same jaw, same brow, same crooked nose. I sent back one of me at the same age. His response came 30 seconds later. "Well, there it is." I stared at those 4 words for a long time. There it is. Not dramatic. Not a movie moment. Just 2 people looking at an undeniable thing and naming it simply. I think that might be the most honest exchange I've had with anyone through this entire ordeal. Elena and I are okay. I want to be honest about the full shape of that. There was a week where I processed some complicated feelings about the 14 months. Not anger. I understood her reasons. I understood them clearly, but something smaller, more personal. A feeling like, even in my own story, I was the last to know. I told her that, sitting at the kitchen table, Same table, different morning. She listened to the whole thing. Then she said, I know, and I'm sorry for that specific part of it. You deserve to know sooner. She paused. I was afraid that if I told you before, you were ready, you'd find a way not to believe it. And then I'd have broken something I couldn't fix. And the thing is, she was right. Past me absolutely would have found a way not to believe it. Past me had an entire architecture built around not seeing. And she knew that better than I did. You know me too well, I said. Yes, she said, without any particular modesty. I do. We started seeing a therapist, Dr. Kim. She has a framed print in her office that says clarity is a form of kindness, and I think about it approximately 4 times a day now. My mother and I spoke for the first time 5 weeks after I asked her to leave. I called her on a Sunday morning. The conversation was 20 minutes. Civil, careful. 2 people who love each other trying to figure out what the shape of that love looks like now that all the furniture has moved. I told her I wasn't ready to go back to normal. I told her normal would need to be rebuilt from different materials. I told her Elena was not going anywhere, and that any version of a relationship we had going forward would need to include that truth as its foundation. She was quiet for most of it, quieter than I've ever heard her. When she finally spoke, she said, I spent so many years just trying to keep everything from falling apart. I told myself I was protecting everyone. I think I know now that I was mostly protecting myself. She paused. I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm genuinely sorry. She did not say, if you say so once, which, in the language my mother speaks, is the loudest thing she's ever said to me. I want to tell you where I actually am. Not the clean version, the real one. I am a man who found out 11 weeks ago that the story he'd been living had a different first chapter than he knew. I have a biological father who is a decent, quiet man who sends me photos occasionally and whose knows I have. I have a mother I love in the permanent, complicated way you love someone who shaped you even when the shaping left marks. I have a father who chose me, who is gone now, and who I cannot thank, and who I think about every single day. I am not resolved. I am not finished processing this. Dr. Kim says that's exactly right. That resolution is a myth we tell ourselves to make grief feel like it has an endpoint. But here's what I know. I am clearer than I have ever been. About my marriage, which turned out to be stronger than the secret it was carrying. About my wife, who waited 14 months and a phone recording and a Tupperware of oatmeal cookies to show me exactly what kind of person she is. About my father, my real father, the man who taught me to drive and coached my little league and walked me down the aisle, who looked at an uncertain situation and chose love with both eyes open. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. I think about something Thomas Calloway said near the end of that first phone call. I'd asked him if he was angry. About the 34 years, about not knowing, about all of it. He was quiet for a moment. I spent a long time being angry, he said. It didn't give me anything back. I'm trying to learn that. I'm not there yet, but I'm trying. Some mornings I make the beef stew. Elena sits at the kitchen table, feet up on the chair across from her, telling me about her day. The light comes through the window at the same angle it always does. The ordinary life I loved is still there, just with a different foundation now, one I can actually see, one I can actually stand on. It doesn't look like what I thought it looked like. It's better, actually, because it's real. And real, I have learned, is the only thing worth building on.